The Zeigarnik effect, otherwise known as the build-up or delay fatigue, is a cognitive bias which happens when one is waiting for a specified task to be completed. The effect was first described by Zeigarnik in 1929. This is a very common phenomenon that can affect any activity that takes longer than a few seconds to complete, although it has been shown to have a particularly strong effect on waiting in line. According to Zeigarnik's theory, when people feel impatient about completing their task, they may begin working on other things and become distracted from what needs doing next, making them more likely to take longer than necessary just because they are busy elsewhere. The Zeigarnik effect is a cognitive bias which happens when one is waiting for a specified task to be completed. It can happen in any activity that takes longer than a few seconds to complete, but has been shown to have particularly strong effects on waiting in line. In this article, we will explore what the Zeigarnik effect is and how it affects us as humans. We'll also talk about why you should care about this little-known phenomenon, whether or not it really exists, and what's going on inside your brain when you're waiting at the supermarket checkout counter. The Zeigarnik effect is also known as build-up or delay fatigue. It's a cognitive bias that affects any activity that takes longer than a few seconds to complete and can have a particularly strong effect on waiting in line. The Zeigarnik effect is a cognitive bias that happens when one is waiting for a specified task to be completed. It can affect any activity that takes longer than a few seconds to complete, although it has been shown to have a particularly strong effect on waiting in line. The phenomenon was originally described by Soviet psychologist Zeigarnik in 1930, who noticed that people would become more productive when they were asked to do something at random intervals during the course of an experiment. For example, if you were given anagrams and asked if they contained any hidden words, then your productivity increased significantly after being asked this question every 3 minutes instead of at regular intervals throughout your session, even though there wasn't anything new happening during those other times. The cognitive bias of the Zeigarnik effect was first described by Zeigarnik in 1929. She was a Russian psychologist, and her work was published in Psychological Review, which is one of the oldest journals in psychology. Zeigarnik described how people have an internal clock that helps them keep track of time. When you're waiting for something, your brain will start telling you to do things so that it can keep track of how much longer it will take before whatever task needs completed. This can lead to mental exhaustion because we're trying our best not only to complete tasks, but also stay focused on them. The Zeigarnik effect is a cognitive bias that can make you feel like you need to do something before you can start another task. It happens when we're waiting for something and our mind wanders off, causing us to lose focus on the thing we're supposed to be doing. The Zeigarnik effect isn't limited to waiting in lines or other situations where there's a delay between tasks. It also occurs when we're doing work on multiple projects simultaneously. When this happens, each project gets less attention because our brain feels like it's getting ready for something else at any moment, say, finishing one song before moving on to another track. This effect can happen when you are waiting for something that needs to be done before you can start another task.